Charlotte, are you there? What I need to say?
Waalaikumsalam. Kumaha Pak Jam-jam sehat sadayana? Bu Nur.
Ya, lancar ya. Bisa digeser coba. Digeser maju.
Halo, Bu Andri. Oh.
Assalamualaikum Prof. Zaid.
Waalaikumsalam. Wah, Pak Adi, panitia ini, Pak Adi.
Halo, assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Ini Pak.
Selamat siang, Bu Nujul. Cukup? Assalamualaikum Pak Dekan, apa bisa dimulai sekarang Bapak? Halo Pak Samanhudi, tadi sudah. Oh J, apakah sudah bisa dimulai sekarang? Juga Bapak, apa sudah bisa dimulai sekarang Pak?
Iya, monggo.
Oh J. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? The presentation is about to begin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Our invited speaker from French National Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment, Dr. Charlotte Kayla, Dean of Faculty of Agriculture, Universitas Sebelas Maret, Professor Samanhudi, Head of Master Program Department of Animal Science, Faculty of Agriculture, Universitas Sebelas Maret, Dr. Adi Mahna Patriadi Nugriyawangsa, all guests who participate in this event. Good afternoon. I'm Lili Kartikasari from Faculty of Agriculture, Universitas Sebelas Maret. I will be serving as your host in this program, and I'm very pleased to see you all here. On behalf of the committee, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you to this scientific meeting conducted by Master Program of Animal Science, Faculty of Agriculture, Universitas Sebelas Maret, supported by media partner Trobos Livestock. We would like to say many thanks to all of you who have joined to participate in this meeting and to share knowledge together. Without your contribution, it is impossible for us to run this activity. We hope you will learn a lot today in relation to dairy farming practice to optimize milk production. Before our program begins, we would like to make some announcements. First, we ask the webinar participants to fill in their presence. The link to the present form and materials will be given during the discussion session. Second, we ask the participants to please mute their speakers to ensure the smooth running of the webinar. Thank you. Third, if participants would like to ask questions, they are welcome to write their name, institution, and question in the chat room. And at the end of the session, we will take picture for documentation. Ladies and gentlemen, in this meeting, we have 4 sessions. The first one is opening remarks. The second session is the Dean's welcome. The third session is scientific presentation and discussion. And the last session is closing remarks. To start this meeting, we will begin with a prayer, Basmalah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you. The next session is the Dean's welcome. Here we are pleased to have Professor Samanhudi, Dean of Faculty of Agriculture, Universitas Sebelas Maret, to deliver the remarks. Please, Professor Samanhudi, the time is yours. Kepada Bapak Profesor Samanhudi, kami beri kesempatan untuk memberikan sambutan pada acara ini. Dipersilahkan.
Terima kasih Bu Lili. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Selamat siang Bapak Ibu yang saya hormati, yang terhormat Kepala Program Studi S2 Peternakan Fakultas Pertanian UNS, Bapak Dr. Insinyur Adi Magna Patriadi Nugriyawangsa, Sarjana Peternakan, Magister Pertanian, IPM, The Honorable Charlotte Kayla, PhD, from French National Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment, Bapak Ibu dosen Program Studi Peternakan Fakultas Pertanian UNS, para peserta kuliah pakar siang hari ini, khususnya mahasiswa kami dari Program Studi Peternakan, baik S2 maupun S1, maupun Bapak Ibu dari berbagai instansi lain yang bergabung di dalam kuliah pakar pada siang hari ini yang saya hormati. First, I would like to say virtually welcome to Charlotte Kailat, PhD, at the Faculty of Agriculture, Sebelas Maret University. Thank you for your times and your experience for our students about dairy farming practices to optimize milk production. Selamat datang Bapak Ibu di dalam webinar pada siang hari ini, bahwa susu merupakan salah satu produk peternakan yang cukup penting, terutama terkait dengan kecukupan nilai gizi maupun kesehatan, sehingga perlu mendapatkan perhatian bagaimana untuk meningkatkan produksi dan kualitas dari susu tersebut. Sehingga tema yang diangkat oleh program studi S2 Peternakan pada siang hari ini tentang bagaimana untuk meningkatkan produksi maupun kualitas susu yang baik, saya kira menjadi penting, dan terutama bagi Bapak Ibu peternak yang menghasilkan susu, sehingga mendapatkan pengetahuan baru, pengalaman baru mungkin dari Dr. Charlotte, dan mudah-mudahan nanti Bapak Ibu bisa menerima materi yang akan beliau sampaikan, sehingga dapat memberikan manfaat yang sebesar-besarnya bagi Bapak Ibu di dalam mendalami persusuan ini, khususnya untuk Bapak Ibu yang bergerak di bidang peternakan yang menghasilkan susu. Pada kesempatan yang baik ini kami ucapkan sekali lagi selamat datang, selamat bergabung, selamat mengikuti webinar pada siang hari ini. Semoga Bapak Ibu bisa mengambil manfaat yang sebesar-besarnya, dan semoga acara kegiatan pada siang hari ini bisa berjalan dengan lancar dan sukses. Apresiasi dan ucapan terima kasih kami sampaikan kepada Kepala Program Studi S2 Peternakan Fakultas Pertanian Universitas 11 Maret beserta seluruh tim yang telah menginisiasi dan menyelenggarakan kegiatan ini, sehingga akan menambah wawasan dan pengetahuan kita semua terkait dengan persusuan ini. Terima kasih, demikian yang dapat kami sampaikan. Ada kurangnya kami mohon maaf. Billahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Professor Samanhudi, for the wonderful remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, turning now to the following sessions, which are presentation and discussion. We are very pleased and honored to have a great speaker, Dr. Charlotte Gaillard from French National Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment. Dr. Charlotte Gaillard will share knowledge in relation to dairy farming practice to optimize milk production. Participants who like to ask questions, again, I remind that please write them in the chat room and mention your name and institution. The committee will address the question to the speaker. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our moderator for this session, Ms. Nuzul Widyas, SPT MSc. Ms. Widyas held her bachelor degree in 2005 in Department of Animal Science, Faculty of Agriculture, Universitas 11 Maret, and her master's degree in 2010 at Master Program of Animal Science, Wageningen University and Research. At this moment, Ms. Nuzul Widyas is working as lecturer in Department of Animal Science, Faculty of Agriculture, Universitas 11 Maret. Now, allow me to welcome the moderator for this session, Ms. Nuzul Widyas. Ms. Widyas, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope my voice can be heard by now. Is it okay? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and greetings to all of you. I would also like to thank all of you for joining the discussion today. So my name is Nuzul, and I'm in charge of leading the discussion today. So the speech topic for this afternoon is dairy farming practice to optimize milk production. A word from us why we are bringing up the issue is because the commercial dairy cattle in Indonesia are almost all imported from either New Zealand or Australia. But the productivity here is much lower than their country of origin. So if we can exclude the genetic factors from the picture, we will left with the environment and management aspect to work with in order to optimize our milk production. So that's why we address this issue and we brought up and we searched for this speaker, Miss Charlotte Gaya. Please, can you put the CV? Okay, this is small introduction of Charlotte. She got her BSc on biology major in France, and then she carry on with an MSc in agricultural engineer, also in France in 2012. And during this time, I believe she also has had an internship about the dairy cows in the University of British Columbia in Canada. And then she did 3 years of PhD in the Aarhus University, Denmark, with the topic also on extended lactation on Holstein cow. Later, she became research assistant in the same institute, and then she also got the postdoc on the same institute. Currently, she is working as a researcher at the INRA in France. Her current project is precision feeding for cows and dairy cattle and dairy cows, of course. So that was our speaker. So now we know that she has a lot of things to be shared with us. And Charlotte, you have around 45 minutes for the lecture and then followed by discussion. But before, I would like to announce it once more time. If you have a question for the audience, please type your question in the chat room by mentioning your name and the institution, and I will deliver the question to the speaker after the lecture. So, Charlotte, the time is yours.
Thank you very much for the nice introduction and for inviting me for this lecture. I really appreciate that. It is very nice to share the knowledge with everybody around the world. So I would like to share my screen, so please tell me when you see it.
Okay, we can see it now.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to talk about dairy farming practices to optimize milk production. And as Nuzur already said, that I'm a lecturer now, I'm a researcher at INRI, and before I worked as a master student in Canada in 2012 on behavior and welfare of dairy calves. Then I did a PhD on extended lactation and feeding strategies in dairy cows in Denmark, very related to the talk that I'm giving now. And then I studied more feeding alternative for cows during my postdoc. And right now, so I'm working on precision feeding for sows since almost 3 years, and I start to work again on dairy cows, again on feeding, precision feeding. If you want to know more about my publication and work, you can click on the link on the right of this slide, so you can see all the papers, the PDF are available. So to give a short introduction about this topic, I want to be sure that we are talking about the same things. So here is the cycle of the mammary gland development. And you can see the development of the mammary gland is starting from the fetal step already. And then you go to a cycle going through mammogenesis, lactogenesis, galactopoiesis, and involution. So see, for this step, I'm sure that you know them already, but yeah, I want to be sure that we're talking about the same thing. So for the mammogenesis, the mammary gland is developing structurally, and this is occurring mainly during pregnancy. And then during the lactogenesis, you have the initiation of milk synthesis and secretion, which is coordinated with parturition. And then for the galactopoiesis, you have the maintenance of milk secretion, and then the involution, so the gland is regressing. and then it's going again with the next lactation. So indeed, the cow can have several lactations, and lactation is here defined as the process of milk synthesis and secretion. So it defines mammals that are dependent of milk for survival after birth. So it's a very important stage of reproduction. And then some few numbers about it. So usually in Europe, at least, we have the first insemination at 15 months. So the cow is quite young, and the gestation duration is around 9 months. And you have the first calving at 2 years, and then you have a lactation that lasts around 12 months. So you have 10 months of milk production and 2 months where the cow is dried, so it's not producing milk. And then, of course, during this cycle, you have the new insemination that is happening around 2 months during the lactation. So the cow is quite efficient, and you can see here on the second slide the standard Holstein production curve. So briefly, this is how the lactation is occurring. So you have a peak of milk yield at around 1-2 months after calving, and the cow is rebreed at around 2 months. So at the same time, more or less, as the peak production. And after this peak production, you have a decline of production before going to the 2 months dry off period. And during this lactation, the cow, Holstein cow, is producing around 20 to 30 liters of milk per cow per day. So it's quite a lot. And I put below this box with Indonesian numbers. So for me, it was really difficult to find information about Indonesia. But yeah, I found out that you have around 500,000 dairy cattle divided in 7 breeds, including some breeds that I will not pronunciate because I'm not sure how it is. And the average productivity is quite low compared to Holstein cows. It's around 12 to 14 liters per day per cow. And you have an average temperature between 20 and 33 degrees. So basically, it's almost summer in your country. It's quite nice. But for cows, it can lead to several problems. So we're going to talk about that. So on this third slide, you see that I tried to categorize the factors influencing milk production and quality. So I divided them into 2 categories. You have the internal factors that correspond to the cow characteristics. So you have the parity, for example, but also the genetic or the stage of lactation. Many factors depending to the animal. On the other side, you have the external factors. So they are linked with the environment, like season, but also to the management, like the feeding system, the milking time, and frequency. So today we cannot talk about everything, but as the first box is really hard to have any control on these internal factors, I'm going to focus on the second box, so the external factors that are possible to control. So among these external factors, I propose 3 categories: the animal management category, the environment category, and the welfare category. So I'm going to explain these 3 categories now. So first of all, the animal management. So the main point here is milking. So indeed, milking duration is around 5 to 6 minutes per cow. As you can see, we have different milking systems. We have the milking parlor. You have the 2 pictures on the top that represent milking parlor in European countries. And you have also some robots that are developed. They are quite recent, but still many farms, at least in Europe, are buying this robot, are investing in them so they can save some time and also have a better idea of how much the cow is producing, and the quality as well of the milk is announced directly by the robot. So it's quite useful actually. And also for a larger herd, like if you have 300 cows, it's really efficient system to have these robots instead of a milking parlor, and the cow are free to go to visit them. So yeah, milking duration is quite short, but you have to take care of milking the cow properly. Otherwise, if you have incomplete milking for several consecutive days, it can permanently reduce milk yield for the entire lactation. So yeah, first of all, do the milking properly, and then you have to think about the interval of milking, because it has been shown that it has a high effect on the milk production and quality. So what is recommended here is to have 12 hours in between two milking, because if you have unequal intervals, you will have less milk. And also, what about the milking frequency? So usually we milk the cows twice per day, but several studies that I'm going to talk about after try to increase or decrease this frequency. What about the milk composition during milking? So if you look at this graph, you see this is the percentage of fat during a milking in different portion of milk. So the first portion is what you milk at the beginning, and then what you have following the milking, and the fourth portion is at the end. So basically, if you don't milk until the end your cow, you won't have this fourth portion. And as you can see on this graph, milk fat increases continuously during the milking process. So the first round of milk contains 1 to 2% of fat, and at the end of milking, you have around 5 to 10% of fat in the milk. So this means that you have a tendency of the fat globules to cluster and be trapped in the alveoli, so inside the mammary gland. So that's why you need to complete your milking to get this fat in your milk and have a higher quality. And actually, you have some residual milk inside the gland that is sometimes hard to release, and it contains up to 20% of the fat. So again, this is the idea to milk properly the cow until the end. So about milking frequency and milk yield, I said that usually we milk twice a day a cow, but here it's a study that tried to milk the cow 3 times. Because they saw, okay, if I'm going from 1 milking to 2 milkings per day, I'm increasing my production for 40%. So why not to increase milking frequency? And actually on this graph, you see that if you milk 3 times your cows, this is the dot line, you have a milk yield that is higher than if you milk the cow 2 times per day. So indeed, if you milk 3 times per day, you can increase by 20% your milk production compared to 2 times milking per day. So yeah, why this milk yield increase with number of milking? Because it's a physiological process linked to the mammary pressure, the intramammary pressure with frequent milking. And it's also a hormonal question, because you have a stimulation of hormone activity that is favorable for milk production that is increased with the number of milking. But if you milk 3 times per day and it's so beneficial, why are we not doing it? We have actually several issues. This 3-time milking may increase the incidence of mastitis due to the exposure to milking machine. And it also exists, if there is already some problems in your farm with your cows, it is not recommended to increase it. For example, if you have many lame cows, they cannot really walk properly to the milking parlor or robot. So you don't have to bring them 3 times per day. Twice is enough. And it's also a question of cost, because of course you are going to spend more time for milking, so this will lead to higher management costs. But actually you can use both ways, combine the ways, so you will have also an effect. As you see on this graph, this is the milk yield during all lactation. And you see the full line is a cow that is milked twice per day during all the lactation, while the dot line is a cow that is milked first 3 times per day until the red line, and after the red line, the cow is milked 2 times per day. So you can see the effect of the 3 times milking remain after the red line. So yeah, you can also do this way of management. So for the first part of lactation, you will spend more time milking 3 times per day. And after maybe 100, 120 days, you can go back to 2 times milking. So you save time, but still increase milk yield. Okay, now that we talk about milking, we have also another factor that is reproduction that we have to look at. So how to improve reproduction and also milk yield, of course. So we have 2 points to discuss here. The point of the dry period first. So the aim, of course, is always to maximize milk production, but to keep a good reproduction level. So usually the dry period is around 40 to 60 days. If you go below that, the yield is reduced of 20 to 40%. And if you go above the 60 days, you have no effect on yield, but the average annual production decreases because you have an extended calving interval. So it's just a matter of number of days. So what about removing the dry period? Maybe this would be beneficial. You can see the graph on the right. This is the daily milk yield regarding lactation week for several lactations, so 3 lactation, consecutive lactation. You have, with the black dots, you have a cow that is milk, that has the normal dry period of 60 days, sorry. And with the white dot, you have a cow that has no dry period. So of course you see that the cow with no dry period is producing less milk than the cow with the dry period. But still, this is possible to maintain lactation and at least 3 lactation, consecutive lactation without no dry period. So then it can also be a strategy. You have to think about what you want and calculate the cost of not having dry period and a little bit less milk. So second point is about extended lactation. So now we're looking at the lactation period, and what we want is not to remove dry period, but extend the lactation to, of course, obtain more milk. So how do we do that? We are delaying rebreeding. So this graph is an example. For example, you have rebreeding at 2 months in a black line, full line, sorry, and rebreeding at 8 months. So this is the dot line. So it means that you have a 12 months calving interval versus a 18 months calving interval. And on this graph, you can see that milk production can be maintained. So lactation persistency is good, but milk yield will be low in the last part of the lactation. So then again, it's a calculation, a balance between cost and productivity, and also health of the animal. Because in terms of health, of course, you will over 3 years have only 2 calving instead of 3, which is quite interesting because calving period is the period around which you have a lot of disease and problems that occurs to the cow. So if you remove 1, you have 30% less troubles, let's say. But yeah, we need to have an overview of the lifespan of the animal in terms of productivity, reproduction, cost, and welfare. So it's what I did mainly in my PhD. And this is a graph from it, where you can see different scenarios. So I'm going to explain the numbers, the lifetime scenario numbers that you can see, 10, 10, 16, 10, 10, 16, etc. So the first number is the first lactation duration. So for example, in 10, 10, the first 10 is a 10 months lactation. The second number is the duration of the following lactation. So for example, for a 16, 10, you have the first lactation, which lasts 16 months, and you have the second and following lactation that lasts 10 months. So of course, extended lactation here are the 16 months lactation, and the normal one are the 10 months lactation. So we wanted to study the effect of this extended lactation continuously for the life of the cow or just for the first lactation, on pregnancy rate in light blue and lifetime efficiency in dark blue. So here you can see that pregnancy rate actually is higher and lifetime efficiency as well for scenarios highlighted in red. So the 1610 and the 1616. So lifetime efficiency, I forgot to say that, was measured as the energy in milk divided by the energy intake. So what it means that extended lactation is a quite interesting management way and is more beneficial for primiparous cows. So this is based mainly on simulation and we have to test it in reality. So we already did some experiment that go to this result, confirm the results, but we need more information about that to study this effect on the lifetime of the cow. Okay, now let's move to feeding strategies. So this is an important topic because we can really act on it. It's quite easy, but it requires many thoughts before. So usually the feed that we use in Europe, it's a total mixed ration. So you can see the picture on the left. This is a mixture of all the elements that the cows need to fulfill her needs in proteins, minerals, and vitamins. Usually the cow is eating 60 to 80 kilograms per day. So it's quite a lot. And she also needs to drink around 90 to 100 liters per day during the lactation. So you need to be sure that the cow has access to enough food and water, so your lactation will be successful. And this is the topic of this slide. So if you feed inadequate nutrient to the cows, this will limit the secretion of the milk, of course. And the galactopoiesis is particularly related to feed intake, so you need to be careful during this period. The most dramatic effect is a shortage of water, as the cow has no means of storing water, so you need really to provide free access to water to all the animals, especially in warm countries. And so if you, just for a few hours, if the cow doesn't have access to this supply of water, there will be a rapid drop in milk yield that can have a very negative effect on the rest of the lactation. So very simple things, but very important. Still about feeding, as we said in the introduction, the mammary gland development starts very early in the life of the animal. So the way you are going to feed the heifers will affect the mammary development. So here you see on this graph that there is an optimum feeding level. You cannot give too much feed thinking that the cow will just use it at the maximum. No, there is an optimal feeding that will impact actually the development of the mammary parenchyma tissue. So the parenchyma tissue is where all the ducts and alveoli are located, so the structure that can produce and store the milk. And you see on the picture, with a moderate feeding level, you have a very developed parenchyma, while for the high feeding level, the parenchyma is quite small. So it's quite important not to feed too much your heifers and define the optimum level of feeding. So now about pregnancy. So you see here two graphs. So you have the weight of the animal and you have the milk produced. For three categories, so for low, medium, and high cows. And you see here that if you feed with a low feed, so low quantity of feed, the weight of the animal, of course, is low because the cow doesn't eat enough. But at the same time, you have a high milk proportion. So during pregnancy, it's actually quite interesting. So you do not have to fatten your cow. So then it can produce more milk. But if you have a fat cow thinking, yeah, I give her a lot of food with a high diet, oh yeah, she will be fat, but she won't produce enough milk. So yeah, there is a high influence of feeding level during pregnancy on the body weight at calving and milk yield. Okay, what about lactation? How do I have to feed my cows during lactation? So to increase milk yield, the easiest strategy are to work on the forage concentrate ratio, so to increase the concentrate part of the diet. And also a new way is to have a supplementation with glycerol. So I put this article below. You can read more about glycerol. This is interesting, but maybe a bit expensive. So I'm going to focus more on the forage concentrate ratio. Here you can see many graphs. So this is the effect of diet composition, so this forage concentrate ratio on ruminal volatile fatty acid on milk production. So if you don't remember about volatile fatty acid, you can go back in the annexes of the slides and you can read about it, how it is produced and why it is important. So this volatile fatty acid, you can see on the graph, on the first graph, they are increasing when the proportion of forage and concentrate is higher in concentrate. And the composition of this volatile fatty acid is also changing with the proportion of forage concentrate. So if you increase the proportion of concentrate, you have an increased proportion of propionic acid. So yeah, with high forage, you have high acetates and low propionate production. So this will lead to high fat percent in milk and low yield. With high concentrate, you will have higher yield due to the higher propionate production. So you can think, okay, let's give to the cow a lot of concentrate so she will produce more milk. No, it doesn't work like this, because if you give an excess of concentrate, then you will have an excess of propionate, which relative to acetate, that makes the cow use the available energy for fatty tissue deposition rather than milk synthesis. So she will gain weight, but she won't produce a lot of milk. So you will get fat cows again. So there is a real need to optimize this forage concentrate ratio, and maybe to use it carefully, especially in the beginning of the lactation, and maybe with an enriched energy diet. And after the peak of milk production, maybe you can just reduce it and give her a diet enriched in forage. So you won't have so much to spend regarding the cost for concentrate, but you will have a relative effect on the milk production. So what are the links between feed and milk composition? Because we talk a lot about milk yield, but not so much about milk composition, just the fat. So most of the changes in composition are due to dietary manipulation related to the forage concentrate ratio, as we talked previously, and changes in ruminal acetate propionate ratio. But it also depends on the plane of nutrition, because if you underfeed your cows, you will reduce the lactose percentage and increase the fat percentage in milk. And also about the forage quality is quite variable. And also the way you give them to the cow will influence the milk composition. For example, if you give finely chopped forages, you will have a decrease of fat percent. And the last point is about the level and type of dietary fat. So I decided to talk more about these last 2 points in the next slides. So what about the particle size effect on milk composition? So yeah, you have here a graph representing ruminal pH regarding hours post-feeding. And you have different types of feed, the hay, the coarse grain, and the fine grain. And you can see that with fine grain, the ruminal pH is lower than with hay. So actually, with finely chopped forages, you have less time chewing that produce less saliva, So in the rumen, you have a drop in ruminal pH below 6, which influences the activity of the bacteria in the rumen, which is reduced. And then you have a reduction of the proportion of acetic and butyric acids that are precursor of short-chain fatty acid synthesis in the mammary gland. So basically, if you feed chopped forages, finely chopped forages, you will have a decrease of fat, and sometimes that can lead to fat depression syndrome if the fat is below 3%. So again, the proportion and the size of particles will be very important regarding the results, high milk yield or sick cow, and the milk composition as well. Okay, what about the dietary fat? So here you see that dietary fat affects milk composition. Indeed, if you include fat or oil in the ration, this will alter the profile of milk fatty acid. So the effect of supplemented fat and milk fat percent depends on the type of supplemented fat. If you feed polyunsaturated fat, giving, for example, vegetable oils in the ration, you will reduce fat percent, but on the opposite, if you feed protected fat, it will increase fat percent. So you have to be careful, of course, not to be in excess, as I said before, in this case, because it would decrease dry matter intake and decrease fiber ingestion. So yeah, it's a balance here again. Okay, let's move to the second part, the environment management. So it will be shorter, this one. I want to talk about temperature because I think this is the main concern also in your country. So here you see that you have the three graphs for the milk composition. So you have a fat percentage and then protein percentage and then lactose percentage regarding the months of the year. And you see here, okay, there are also the parities effect, but in general, you see that during the summer, there are the green highlighted periods, at least in our countries. You have a very warm temperature during these months, and this leads to a decrease of fat and protein. So here for us, we have the season and parity that affect milk composition and also milk production that will decline when the temperature will be above 27 degrees, mainly due to the drop in feed intake. So we'll have maybe around 8% difference between milk production during winter and summer. So for you, I think, well, it's always warm, so you always have this concern of temperature. And I think you also need to think about the humidity, the humidity, because it's part of the calculation of the effect of temperature. You have a humidity that is varying between 70 and 90%, so it's quite high. And actually, in the next slide, you can see this is the temperature humidity index, that these two parameters are highly correlated. So there is this index that indicates the combined effect of environmental temperature and relative humidity, and can assess the risk of heat stress. So yeah, if you are above an index of 72, you will have different ways to reach these thresholds. Regarding the humidity percent and temperature, as you see, is quite variable. But this, if you are above this index of 72, you will have a decrease of milk production. So then you really need to have some ways to reduce heat stress. We're going to talk about that. And above 72, you will also have a decrease of daily fat and protein content. So it will affect both the quantity and the quality of milk. So heat stress is a main concern. And just to have a summary of how it's working, heat stress is increasing respiration rate, but it's also increasing sweating. Sweating then will reduce the body water, and then will increase the intake of water. So if you drink a lot of water, you don't have space in the rumen for food. So then you lack food. And this decrease of feed intake will decrease reproductive performance and will decrease milk production. So, okay, we spotted well the problems, but how do we solve that? Okay, I listed three practical solutions to reduce heat stress. The first one is the installation of fans, as you can see on this picture. So in big commercial farm, it's quite easy to put some fans because the cows are indoor. We can also in the lower picture put some sprinklers to keep the cow fresh. Actually, this will decrease the heat stress. So we can maybe hope to be below the 72 threshold for the THI index. And the other solution is also to plant some trees around the place of the cows to make some natural shade. This is also working, but of course you need trees, and to grow trees is taking time. Okay, let's move now to the photoperiod. This is also a very important part of the environmental effect. So on this graph, you see this milk production for different studies actually, and in black you have the natural photoperiod of 8 to 13.5 hours per day, and in white you have the extended photoperiod of 16 to 18 hours per day. You can see in general the white columns are higher than the black columns, so extended photoperiod will increase milk yield. Okay, so then what about the effect of photoperiod during the prepubertal period? Here again, you have the milk yield, and you have the long days in white and the short days in black. And you can see here that the extended photoperiod during the prepubertal period will increase milk production in the first 5 months of lactation. So you have a reported effect, so you have to be really careful during the prepubertal period and how you manage your cows regarding light and the duration of the light during the day. Okay, I'm moving to the third part of this presentation, the last one. So I hope I still have time for that. This is the welfare management. So what we want is that we want happy cows, basically, because happy cows will produce more milk with a better quality. It's what we hope for. Okay, but welfare is not just about being happy. It's also a question of health and behavior. So about health, we have here the main health issues that are listed and detected on farms. So this health issue will have a very negative effect on milk quality and production as well. So I listed here three main diseases, so the mastitis, the lameness, and the infertility that are our main concern, at least in Europe. And we need to prevent or to find a way to detect them earlier because their impact will be very strong. So yeah, we try also to automatize this detection and not just put all this weight on the farmer. So just to make a point on somatic cell counts that are also defining milk quality. So the SCC it represents a very important quality parameter for raw milk. They are an indicator of the mammary gland health. If you are below a certain threshold of 100,000 cells per milliliter, the gland is healthy. If you are above this number, you will have a probable bacterial infection. So here you have a negative effect of high somatic cells count. So you have a decrease in milk production, but also a decrease in milk quality with, for example, difficulties to make cheese because you have the decrease of activity of yogurt fermentation. Okay, so here, how to manage your cows. So you have healthy cows and good milk quality. So here I try to list some factors, main factors affecting the milk quality. So you have the cows itself that is a source of infection. So you need to try to keep it clean and healthy. And you have also exogenous sources such as environment. So you have the climate, the soil, the water, the manure, or the human contact that can be listed. And of course, you also have the equipment and the human milk handlers that need to be, well, to be managed properly and clean regularly. And the second point, the second important point in this part is the disease part, of course, as I talked about it previously. So here you have the mastitis, lameness, and infertility and their effects on milk production and milk composition as well as reproduction. So most of them have negative effect on these three variables. And I also listed the causes on the right side of the table that we talk about, but you can read the table yourself. So just to go deeper in each of these diseases, so for the mastitis, mastitis impairs the ability of secretory tissues to synthesize milk component and destroys secretory tissues. So with this disease, you will have a permanent or at least persistent decrease of the milk production even after the disappearance of the clinical signs. So yeah, you need to be very careful about mastitis, and it's quite easy to find out if a cow has mastitis. You will have a decrease of milk fat, lactose, and protein content in milk, and an increase of the somatic cells that we talked about. And also you have to be careful because as you see on the bottom picture, you have this disease can be only focused on one quarter of the udder and not on the fourth quarter. So you can detect with some very easy colorimetric test which quarter is sick actually, and keep milking properly the third other quarter and use the milk for these quarters. So another disease that is important to mention is acetonemia or ketosis. So this is defined as hypoglycemia and increased ketone bodies in the blood, resulting mainly from adipose mobilization. So you can read more about that in the annexes as well. This is usually occurring during the first weeks of lactation, when the energy demands exceed the energy intake and results in a negative energy balance. So yeah, for your information, if you want to produce 40 kilograms of milk, you will need to have 2 kilograms of glucose as precursor of lactose. So it's quite high. About the symptoms, as I said before, you will have a decrease of dry matter intake because the cow will lack of appetite, which will lead to a decrease of body weight, but also a decrease of milk yield. So very easy to identify. And as well, you will have a fever sometimes. About the treatment, so they all aim at increasing blood glucose. So they are about feeding different strategies like you can add propylene glycol in the ration. About prevention, so you can feed moderately your cows during the dry period until 2-3 weeks prepartum. This will, you can also increase feeding during the postpartum period. So yeah, some ways to prevent the disease. And the last disease I wanted to talk about is the milk fever or hypocalcemia, which is actually a reduction of blood calcium levels that is associated with an increased risk of ketosis and decreased reproductive performance, so quite important. The symptoms are really clear here again. So you have a low body temperature, a general weakness, a loss of appetite, and eventually heart failure. So for that, unfortunately, you can do nothing. But what is the causes of this disease? Actually, the calcium is rapidly removed from the animal after parturition. So the calcium mobilization from the bones is not enough. So the cow needs calcium from the intestinal absorption. But at this time, you have a postpartum depressed appetite. So it's very hard for the cows to have the require a level of calcium. So what you can do is, of course, to inject some calcium. But the best, of course, is prevention with a proper diet and the administration of a dose of calcium salt. Sometimes this is difficult for the cow to swallow, but yeah, can be useful. Okay, the last point of this part is about behavior and stress. So stress is reducing milk yield, and we need to avoid it to avoid this perturbation regarding milk yield particularly. So here, okay, how to measure stress and how to avoid it. So I try to list some tools that we can use to measure the stress in a dairy cow herd. So you have the cortisol levels, for example, that will be multiplied by 10 during heat stress. So you can measure them in the blood, but also in the feces. You have a measurement of heart rate or heart rate variability. There are many papers about that. But of course, it's not something easy to measure. So the easier changes that you can observe are behavioral changes. So you will have changes in behavior, feeding behavior and drinking behavior, but also about social behavior and activity. So the cows can be more aggressive, or they can isolate themselves, or they can have some stereotypies, for example. About the stress factors, so we have here different factors. For sure you can have more, but I try to reduce this list. You have thermic stress, so it can be heat or cold stress. We already talked about heat stress. And you can also have isolation or new environment or transportation that really can affect the cow. The cow is very sensitive. So you really need to keep an environment that is stable, that she knows, so she doesn't get stressed. It's the same for the number of individuals in the herd, and she doesn't really like new individuals. So yeah, there is an adaptation time for that. And then, of course, the sound, the smell, the light are also factors that will affect her, as well as the lack of food, of water. Of course, this is stressful even for us. We wouldn't like to be deprived of food. And then you also have the disease of pain. Of course, if the cow is sick or is hurt, it will lead to a high level of stress, and then it will impact milk production. So these are the factors. So here I put some ideas on how to avoid stress. I really like the picture on the right. Of course, we don't do that in our country, but well, I don't know how it's working for your countries, but I thought the idea funny, you know, how to transport the cows is a very big debate actually in here. We have a lot of rules, and we need to report anything that happened during transportation, so it's very strict. But yeah, to come back to the slides, so to avoid stress, you can do many things. You can supplement the cow in mineral. You can also have a sick pen for the sick animals, so you separate the animals actually. You can keep a familiar environment for the cow. You can also have a pasture rotation, so the cow always gets some fresh grass if it's housed outside. You can just also do the calving during summer. This is easier for the cows to be outside. And you can minimize social stress, as I talked about. So avoid to put a new animal in the group. You can also reduce the handling. Try not to be too much with the cows so they don't get stressed or bring a new person that they don't know. Of course, again, enough feed and water, that is a very important and relevant point. And be careful of the environment of the cow, for example, by smoothing the concrete edge. You never know what is around her. Anything that can be sharp can hurt the animal, so you have to be careful about that. And of course, reduce the transport stress, as I said before. So yeah, to conclude, briefly, I want to say that there are many practices in dairy farming to optimize milk production and milk composition. So in our three categories, we saw that we can act on milking frequency, reproduction plane, feeding strategy, temperature, humidity, photoperiods, and as well as the health of the cow, reduce her stress, and check her behavior to manage these criteria. So many points to look at and many things to do to try to have the best production, still keeping the cows in a good health. So I thank you for your attention, and if you have any question, I will try to answer them. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Charlotte, for the very clear and interesting presentation. So, can you please stop your screen?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, now is the time for discussion. So we will try to answer some question online directly here, and we will split this into two parts. The first part, we will have two questions. And then we will carry on, depends on how much time we have left, okay?
Okay.
No? Okay, sorry for that. So thank you for the very clear and interesting speech, Charlotte. And now is the question and discussion time. I will try to divide this into two parts. In the first part, we will have two questions, and then you will answer them. And then we will carry on with the second part, but that would depend on how much time we will have left. Because we have like appointment in 1 hour, right? So now the first question. There's a question from Andriani Astuti from Gajah Mada University, and she would like you to share your opinion about the feeding level on dry period to maximize the production of the milk on the lactation period. Is it low, moderate, or high energy level? Which one you recommend more?
Yeah.
And then the second question, wait. So this is from Siska Aditya from Brawijaya University. So in Indonesia, the case of subacute ruminal acidosis might be quite low compared to Europe. But the case of heat stress is more higher here, as the humidity and the temperature is also higher. So there is a crosstalk between heat stress and subacute rumen acidosis. The question is, in your opinion, which feeding strategy should we choose? Is it the total mixed ration or the partial mixed ration to face these incidents? Yeah, those are the two questions for the first term.
Okay, so the first, thank you. The first question about the feeding level during dry period. So I don't know if you have access to the slides, but on slide 46, I put some example of diets, including a diet for dry period. And usually these diets, they are lower in crude protein, they are lower in crude fat, and they are lower in starch. So the idea is to have a lower energy diet compared to the diets during lactation. As I said before, you do not want your cow to be too fat when she will calve. So at the end of the lactation, of course, you need to help the cow to rebuild her body reserves that she used during lactation, but also that she's using during gestation. Because you do not have to forget that the new calf is in construction, let's say. So yeah, you have to think about these 2 points, but also how the cow will arrive to the calving time, you know. So yeah, do not feed too much your cow during this period. This is the idea. And yeah, so I hope I answered the question for this one. just check at the table on slide 46. If you need more information, you can also write me an email. And there is also information on the link on the same slide. This is linked to a paper about the feeding strategies. About the second question about heat stress, so I'm not a specialist of heat stress, so I'm not going to answer completely the question, I think. So you say, what about choosing TMR or PMR for the heat stress time? Well, I'm not so sure. It will depend really on the level of heat stress and how you can manage your cows from the external point of view. Like, will the cow have access to the shade? Do you have sprinklers? Do you have fans? And also, which type of food is available for you? I don't think it really depends on TMR or PMR, because it depends really what you put inside of the ration. Then the way you choose total or partial mixed ration doesn't really matter, I think. I'm not so sure about the feed that you are using in Indonesia. So for me, it's quite hard to compare, what I know and what you can use. So I won't give more details on that, but yeah, I think we can look at it together. If you need some information, I can search for that.
Okay, that was the first two questions. So how many minutes we have now left? Okay, we have 10 minutes left. And we will try to address two more questions. But then if it's still there are some time left, we can add more. So this is a quite long question, but I will try to summarize them. So in Indonesia, we have a small scale production system. This is from OPI. I'm not sure because that's what is written here. So small scale production system, it means that like a rural farmer, they have 3 to 5 cows per household. So we don't really have that much dairy industry. There are some, but mostly are this kind of small scale. So, and this small scale, they don't have any automatic milking systems. So no robots, no machine. So they did it mostly manually. So what's your opinion on this manual milking procedure, especially on this the occurrence of the production of milk and the milk composition, and also if we would like to do like 3 times milking frequency using manual milking system, do you think it's feasible or it's feasible? What's the pro and what's the contra on this? So
yeah,
go ahead.
Well, this question is a bit difficult for me, very different from my system I use, but because I need some more information, I think, when you are talking about manual milking, so do you have any machine that help you that you can move from one cow to another, or is it really just with hands, for example?
Okay.
If it's just with hands, for sure, the cow will be sensitive to the person that is milking, and the time that you have will also influence the composition, the yield, as I said before, because if you think that it's over, but maybe the cow needs more time to release the milk, you will miss the last part of the milk that is very rich in fat. So I'm not sure as well how long it takes for a human to milk a cow. So there are very, so many variables that I will have to think about, but yeah, I think then it depends also. If you have time to do it 3 times per day or 2 times per day, I think it's easier if you do just 2 times because you will milk the cow in the morning and once in the evening. And I think it will be easier to keep a very, homogeneous interval between the milking. So 12 hours milking interval will be the best. So I would still think that, 2 times milking is enough. And then you say, of course, you don't have robots and things like that. So I have a question for you, like how do you measure the milk composition? Do you have to send some samples to the lab each time, or how do you know what is your composition?
Okay. For that, I know just a little because I'm not a milk person. There are some cooperation in some areas. So like in a village, they have a cooperation or something like that. And the cooperation will have some tools to measure such things. So they have the facility, but not in every household. That's
Okay.
how we do it. So yeah, that's quite different with what happened in Europe.
Yeah, because for us it's so easy to follow that regularly. Maybe once we will get the composition instantaneously, let's say. So it's easier to manage, of course.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe 2 more questions, Charlotte. I will give you 2 more questions. So the first one is from Zainal Bahruddin Masruki. So how to improve the fertility of cow during lactation, and what is the benefit of the glycerol addition? Is glycerol can be protected from the rumen fermentation during feeding system to the animals? That's the first question. And the second question is, what is the ideal during the dry period to reduce the risk of mastitis in the next lactation? Those are the 2 last questions I think that we can address today.
So the ideal tool, or what do you say?
The ideal treatments.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so I just write the question before I forget them.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so how to improve the fertility? Well, that's a very big question. I think, yeah, regarding feeding, you can improve it. But the problem is, you know, at least our cows, they are selected genetically, and more we select them for milk and less they are good for reproduction. So it's a very difficult balance for us. And the main problem is very internal factors problem. You know, it's not really external. So if we want to help them to have a better fertility, it will be mainly regarding feeding. So as I explained during the presentation, when do you have to increase or not the energy in the ration? That will be a very important part, especially in early lactation. So as I said, we have the peak of milk yield, and at the same time, we have to rebreed the cows. So it's very energy, it costs a lot of energy for the cow to do this, plus to rebuild her body reserves. So yeah, this is the main period where we have to be careful for the feeding strategy. But actually, during my PhD, I tried to help the cows during that period to also improve the fertility, let's say, the chances of success to rebreed the animal. And I didn't really see an effect of increasing the energy of the ration on the fertility, but I really saw a better reproduction performance when I was delaying rebreeding. So thinking, okay, first let the cow do her peak of milk, rebuild her reserves, and then she will be more ready for a new calf. So for me, extended lactation, postponing rebreeding helped a bit to improve the fertility, let's say. But yeah, I think the problem is the genetic. I'm not sure how are your cows, if they are efficient or not. You know, sometimes we have to inseminate the cows several times. It's not really for us a problem of detection of estrus, because for that we have all the tools that are necessary. For you, I'm not sure how it's working. So maybe that can also be a point to look at. And the second part of the question was the glycerol addition. So for that, how it is useful, I think it's a very big debate and it will need to go through a lot of physiological points. So I just prefer to tell the person to look at the paper. So I also published a paper on that. And I think you will have all the information about the effect of glycerol. The main idea is just to supply the cow with easy glucose, so she get more energy from that. But yeah, the effect is not, it is, yeah, we can see an effect of this procedure, but I'm not so sure it's easy to make, and then also easy to buy for you, or if it's a good solution. I think this is more in the last kind of solution that you can use. I think it's better to look at alternative feeding if you want to play on the feeding strategy and supply the cow with energy with a low cost, actually. You can look at maybe distiller dry grain or all the feed that are not used for human food, the residual feed that can be maybe used for the cows. Or maybe you can also use seaweeds because you are close to you are surrounded by water, so I'm not sure if you had some seaweeds that you can use that will mainly enrich the ration in protein. And that can also be a very good way to feed the cows with a cheap price. I'm not so sure if it's cheap to use the seaweeds, but yeah. And then the last question was the treatment for mastitis. So for that, I cannot answer you because I'm not a vet. So, I mean, if we have a problem with mastitis, we call the vet actually. Yeah, I think you should still identify which quarter of the udder is sick and continue milking the rest of the quarters so you don't lose too much milk production. That's the point.
Okay, so I think we ran out of time. So just another announcement for all of the participants here. The remaining question that addressed to us, we will answer them later, and I will try to ask Charlotte to answer them by email. And then we will collect, summarize, and distribute them in written files to all of the participants here because we have all of the emails. So I think I can summarize some of the topic that we discussed today. There are three main external aspects that can be altered to optimize milk production. The first aspect is the animal management. It, of course, will affect the milk yield and the milk composition. The main point from animal management is that we have to milk our cows completely. And then we also have to manage the reproduction aspect. And then we have to give them proper and sufficient water and feed. So feeding strategies also included in this aspect, and we can give them feeding strategies and composition suitable for each living phase. Of course, in different living phase, you have different requirement for nutrients. And then the second external aspect is the environment management. This is related to stress, all kind of stress, especially the heat stress. And this is related a lot with our country, which have high temperature and high humidity, and also the photo period. But the photo period, I don't think that will affect much because we have almost similar photo period the whole year. And the third aspect is the welfare management. It's related to the health and behavior of the cows. The pinpoint is happy cows, we will have a better milk yield and better milk quality. The welfare aspect also include the health management. We have to give them proper prevention and treatment for each diseases. And then there are also stress with many factors. And because stress is difficult to assess, then we have to check their behavior. This is what we miss the most, Charlotte, from our place. We don't really pay attention on the welfare and behavior. So that's our remarks for today. I would like to say my appreciation to Charlotte, who is willing to share knowledge with us this afternoon, here of course there is morning. And for that, we would like to award you with a small token of appreciation. It will be an online certificate, just like what we have here, and we will I will send it to you by email later on. Okay.
Thank
So,
you.
thank you very much. And I return the discussion to the host today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Nujul Widyas, who led the presentation and discussion in this webinar. We are grateful to Dr. Charlotte Gaylord because you really addressed the interesting topic, how to optimize milk production. Well, ladies and gentlemen, finally we come to the end part of this meeting. On behalf of the committee, we would like to thank to the Dean of the Faculty of Agriculture, Universitas 11 Maret. We appreciate the honorable speaker who has shared some great knowledge related to dairy farming practice to optimize milk production. Hopefully, it can provide benefits for all of us. Thank you to the webinar participants who were so enthusiastic in listening and asking questions. And of course, thank you to great organizers and committee who worked hard so that this afternoon's program went well and was filled with positive enthusiasm. And thank to media partner of Trobos Livestock who helped make this guest lecture webinar successful. Ladies and gentlemen, for the document purposes, we would like to take picture of all the participants, speakers, and committee members together. So please turn on your videos. Committee members, please take the picture for us. Please, the video on. Is it already done? Okay, thank you. Here are some announcements. For those who have not filled in the presents, please fill it in immediately. The material can be downloaded via the link written in the comment column. The certificate can be downloaded automatically through the webinar participants' email after each person has filled in their presents. Okay, now we enter the last event. Let us close this webinar by saying hamdalah together. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. And before we close, there are some information I just tell in Indonesia. So, program studi S2 Peternakan merupakan program studi di bawah Fakultas Pertanian UNS, berdiri tahun 2018 dan sudah berjalan 2 semester, yaitu semester genap dan ganjil tahun 2019-2020. S2 Peternakan UNS mempunyai 4 minat studi. Yang pertama adalah produksi ternak, yang kedua ilmu nutrisi dan ilmu makanan ternak, yang ketiga teknologi hasil ternak, dan yang keempat sosial dan ekonomi peternakan. Pendaftaran diadakan setiap semester genap dan ganjil pada awal semester. Untuk keterangan lebih lanjut bisa mengunjungi website kami pada link web yang sudah tertera pada slide. As the Master of Ceremonies, I apologize if there are deficiencies and inconveniences in organizing this webinar. Thank you for your attention and see you at the next WebMaster series. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Charlotte.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining this. See you for the next.
Terima kasih semua.
Sama-sama. Terima kasih.
Prof. Kalimon.
Zainal Bahrudin.
Prof.
Selamat.
Budi, Prof. Alimon, terima kasih.
Pak Zainal, apa kabar Pak Zainal?
Masih. Woi Pak Alimon, gimana nih?
Sehat, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Oke. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Malaysia Melu.
Ya, baik. Terima kasih. Monggo ditunggu di situ. Tidak ada corona.
Halo.
Assalamualaikum Bu Andri.
Terima kasih juga Bapak Ibu yang dari Prodi Peternakan Fakultas Pertanian UNS sudah berkenan untuk bergabung. Terima kasih ada Pak Trisno Hadi, Bu Santi dan lain-lain tadi. Juga Bapak Eka, terima kasih Pak WD1 Fakultas Pertanian UNS tadi sudah berkenan hadir.
Juga Pak WD2, Pak
J,
Didi.
Pak WD2, Bapak Sudadi tadi juga lenggah.
Tolong Joko nanu ya. Apa? Mosku. Mos. Ning tasiku. Lak tutup iki.
Selamat Pak Adi, Bu Lili.
Sama-sama, matur nuwun. Terima kasih Pak Samad sudah kesel membuka terus. J. Terima kasih sekali loh Prof Samad.
Saya akreditasi nih Prof. Pak Dadi, matur nuwun Pak Dadi.
Matur nuwun Pak Dadi, Prof Saman, Bapak Eka, semua tadi lenggah saya terlihat tadi sudah mensupport.
Madi dari Bapak Ibu akan semuanya.
Ya,
susunya semakin banyak.
Amin. Ini Prof, Pak Dadi.
Jadi ya, pesertanya dari luar banyak sekali ya. Juga ya.
Banyak itu Prof. Tadi dari mana ya?
Malaysia dari berbagai instansi.
Kalau berbicara semuanya suka lah, yang mesti banyak yang ikut.
J tadi biasanya jauh-jauh yang ikut malah.
Iya.
Pak Dadi seneng sapi ya?
Pak Trisno.
Iya.
Pak Tris.
Semuanya suka. Dari
kalau waktu kecil saya itu angon sapi. Angon sapi.
Saya dulu angon sapi. Pernah angon sapi.
Semuanya disemplak sapi udah pernah, dijatuhkan dari punggung sapi itu sudah pernah.
Buruh tapi orang disabit dulu.
Nggih ngarit nggih Prof nggih. Ngarit ngedusi.
Monggo dilanjut Pak Adi, Bu Lili.
Nuwun sangat Prof. Saman sudah kerso rawuh sama Pak Dadi, Pak Eka juga, Pak Trisno.
Pak Adi,
Amin.
Matur nuwun sangat.
Matur nuwun.
Wah, Pak Adi Ratri juga ini masih.
Iya.
Ini
Ini
operator.
Pak WD satu sedang
serius. Berdoa terus Pak Adi Ratri. Semoga lancar DB-nya.
Amin. Ikut berdoa.
Segera menyusul.
Matur nuwun Prof.
Nyuwun pamit.
Monggo matur nuwun sangat Prof. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Pak Dekan iki.
Matur nuwun sangat Pak Dadi. Bagi yang masih lenggah, terima kasih sekali lagi kami sampaikan sudah berkenan hadir di webinar. Jadi barangkali kami akhiri acara pada webinar. Sekali lagi kami ucapkan terima kasih. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.